I'm Joy.
It's been a year since I walked out on my old life, and the peace that has settled over me is something I could have never imagined. Tonight, I'm sitting on the porch of my cabin in Corrales, wrapped in a soft blanket, a mug of tea warming my hands. The sky above me is a canvas of oranges, deep roses, and violets, and the New Mexico sunset feels like a benediction. As I look out at the landscape, I'm reminded of how far I've come. A year ago, I was trapped in a marriage that was slowly suffocating me, my every move controlled by my husband, Ethan, and his sister, Lily. I was a shell of myself, constantly walking on eggshells to keep the peace. But then everything changed. It all started with a phone call from a law office in downtown Albuquerque. I was working on a design mock-up for a local client in my small freelance office when my phone buzzed. An unknown number lit up the screen. I hesitated, thinking it might be spam or a demanding client. But something made me answer. A calm female voice on the other end introduced herself as Linda from the law office of MS
Harper.
She said she was calling regarding the estate of my grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson. I was stunned. My grandmother had always lived a simple life, in a small rental, clipping coupons and mending her clothes. I couldn't believe she had an estate. Linda said Ms. Harper needed to meet with me as soon as possible and asked if I could come to the office that day. I heard myself say yes, though I was in a state of complete confusion. I saved my work, grabbed my bag, and headed out into the dry late-day heat. As I drove to the law office, memories of my grandmother flooded back. Her gentle hands guiding mine as a child, her warm laugh, and the quiet strength she carried even after losing so much. The drive felt endless, and I was filled with a growing sense of unease. When I arrived at the law office, I was shown into a conference room. Ms. Harper, a composed woman in her late 50s with gray, streaked hair pulled into a low twist, greeted me. She placed a thick folder on the table and began to explain. My grandmother, it turned out, owned 3 residential units in Albuquerque, one in Vista Hills, one in the Heights, and one near the Old Quarter. All fully paid off. She also had a deed to a small cabin just outside Corrales, with about 2 acres of land. And there was a savings account that she had contributed to for over 40 years, with a substantial balance. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My grandmother, who had always seemed so frugal, had been secretly building this wealth for me. Ms. Harper then handed me an envelope with my name written in my grandmother's neat handwriting. She said it was specifically for me and that I should read it alone. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the envelope. The weight of it felt heavier than all the property documents and account statements on my dining table combined. I broke the seal, and the paper smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent my grandmother used to keep in her dresser drawers. In the letter, my grandmother wrote about her youth, how she saved every extra dollar she earned, and how she bought her first small apartment in Albuquerque long before the city grew and prices rose. She described working 2 jobs at times, clipping coupons not out of poverty, but as a discipline. She bought the cabin in Corrales as a refuge, a place she hoped I would one day find peace in. But then the tone of the letter changed. She wrote that she had never told me about any of this because love can make even the strongest women vulnerable. She said she had watched me give, and she worried that certain people in my life might take advantage of my kind heart. She specifically mentioned Ethan and Lily. She said she feared Ethan didn't understand how to stand beside me as an equal and that Lily saw me as someone to use when convenient. She told me that independence is not born from wealth, but from clarity. She left me these properties and savings so that I could stand on my own feet if ever the ground beneath me shifted. I read those words over and over again. It was like a wake-up call. I had spent years ignoring the small signs of control and manipulation in my marriage. Ethan and Lily had slowly chipped away at my confidence, making me doubt myself and my decisions. After that, I started to notice things more clearly. One evening, I came home later than usual. As I approached my apartment, I heard voices inside. Ethan's low, irritated tone and Lily's sharp, cutting whisper. I froze and listened. They were talking about my inheritance. Lily said I was too naive to handle it and that we needed to make me sell the properties quickly. Ethan agreed, saying that once I cashed out, we would have hundreds of thousands of dollars in liquid assets for their solar project and investment plan. And then he said he would file for divorce. My blood ran cold. I reached into my bag, took out my phone, and started recording. I listened as they outlined their plan to use me and then discard me. It was a shock, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. The next day, I went to see Ms. Harper. I played the recording for her, and she assured me that under New Mexico law, all my inherited assets were separate property. Ethan had no claim to them unless I chose to mingle, or transfer ownership. She gave me a list of things to do, immediately. I opened a private bank account at a bank Ethan didn't use, rented a safe, deposit box for all the deeds, statements, and my grandmother's letter, and moved all the property documents out of my apartment. I also decided to keep everything a secret from Ethan and Lily and continue life as usual. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lily tried to be overly affectionate and sweet. Ethan suggested we start a family and look for a bigger house. Lily cooked elaborate breakfasts and complimented me on everything. But I could see through their false concern. I recorded every conversation, every attempt to manipulate me. As the days passed, their patience wore thin. Lily started to show her true colors. She would read my planner without asking, knock over my handbag, and complain to Ethan that I was being paranoid. Ethan confronted me, demanding financial transparency. One day, I decided to start preparing for my exit. I chose the Vista Hills apartment. It was empty and far from my current life. I cleaned it, stocked it with groceries, and set up a mattress. I did all this in secret, not telling anyone where I was going. The tension at home grew. Ethan and Lily became more and more suspicious. One quiet weekday evening, Lily stormed into the kitchen. She demanded my inheritance, saying it belonged to the family. Ethan joined her, saying I was being unreasonable and that we were supposed to be a team. I finally snapped. I looked them in the eye and said, "I don't owe either of you anything." The silence that followed was electric. They stared at me as if they didn't recognize me. I turned off the stove, wiped my hands, and walked out of the kitchen. That night, I emailed Ms. Harper all the recordings. I knew my exit was no longer a plan, but a reality. The next morning, before the sun rose, I left a note on the kitchen table and packed my bags. I drove to the Vista Hills apartment, feeling a sense of calm and relief. Later that morning, Ms. Harper filed a formal petition for dissolution of marriage with the Bernalillo County Court, citing emotional abuse, manipulation, and financial coercion. Ethan received the papers that afternoon, and his calls and messages started to flood my phone. But I blocked his number and Lily's. Now, a year later, my life is completely different. The apartment in Vista Hills is my home, a place where I can breathe freely. I've learned to manage my properties, and my design clients have multiplied. I've also found peace at the cabin in Corrales. I've planted a small garden, restored the old rocking chair, and learned to appreciate the simple things in life. I no longer carry the weight of Ethan and Lily's cruelty. I've learned my lessons, and I'm determined never to let anyone treat me like that again. As I watch the last light of the sunset disappear behind the mountains, I whisper, "Thank you, Grandma," and I feel the weight of the past finally lift from my shoulders. I'm free.